What's up, everyone? We are back with another podcast. This is the Odum and Andrea show, where myself and my beautiful wife, Andrea, get together and talk about a book that she's read that follows somebody that's either done something really interesting or really cool, inspiring, what have you. And we talk about their ideas and their philosophies, and we see if there's anything that we want to incorporate into our life, into our journey, into becoming basically, I don't know, the best versions of ourselves, the best people.
Absolutely.
The best couple,
Absolutely.
all those kinds of things. And today we are going to be talking about this book, Breathe, A Life in Flow. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu legend Rickson Gracie. Also, he's probably the Gracie family with Peter Maguire. Is he related to Pierre Maguire by any chance?
No idea.
Okay. Forward by Jocko, of course. Let's put that up there for everyone to see. Yeah. Oh, what are you doing?
Other side.
The other side? What's
side.
going on?
There you go. That's better. That was bothering me. That's good.
I asked you before we started. I said, how are my brows?
They're
and you're
wild.
like, what?
They're good now.
They're good now?
They're good now.
Now I'm self-conscious the whole time.
No, it's okay.
For those of you watching this on YouTube, don't watch anymore because my brows are crazy. Yeah, so anyways, just make sure I'm in focus here. So, Breathe, A Life in the Flow. So obviously, you've never done jiu-jitsu before. I've done it before for about on and off for about a year or so.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. I think it's probably, if there's one self-defense that you could take in order to just have the basics in order how to defend yourself against some guy who doesn't know how to fight, that's probably the best, because it's all about like wrestling and grappling, because that's how fights go. It's like you just kind of hug each other and roll around. And if you could hug someone and put them in a submission, that's pretty good. So that next to Muay Thai as well, to have good striking is also really, really good. But if I had to pick one, it'd be that. So I'm excited because, it's something that I wanted to get into. We wanted to get into this since we got here in Nova Scotia. But of course, everything closed down for a couple of years. So that was a little bit challenging for a lot of people, really. Yeah. So this should be interesting. And the Gracie family, they're legendary because I think one of the, what is it? I don't know the guy at the name. I should know this. This is kind of shameful. But he was the one that won the first UFC fight against the guy with the long hair, and he's like pulling hair and everything. But anyways, they're legendary. They're really obviously good at jiu-jitsu. But anyways, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about it. So before we get into this, if you like any of the stuff that we do, please check out our website, odumandandrea.com. We've got lots of cool behind-the-scenes stuff for you. And with that out of the way, let's learn about Rickson Gracie. Breathe, A Life in Flow.
So it kind of surprises me that you don't know, like, the Gracie family it used to be called Gracie Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah, no, I know.
Oh, okay. Just the way you were talking was just like, they.
Well, I'm just saying I don't know the name of the guy who won the UFC.
Oh no, so like they invented jiu-jitsu, like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, basically. And so what really surprised me, he goes into like a lot of background about his family, and they actually originated from Scotland.
Okay.
And came over, and I was like, Scotland? How to Scotland to like Brazil? Like, this is crazy. But yeah, so I guess his great grandfather came over from Scotland, and they were just like a bunch of kind of fighters in there in Scotland as well, like scrappers and whatnot. Yeah. And so it was kind of interesting because he talks like a little bit about like some of his family history and like notable ancestors. And so one of his relatives was Archibald Gracie, who went to New York City. He made a fortune there in like a shipping business in the 1700s, and he was in business with one of the U.S.'s founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, which was like, whoa, that's really cool. And so the Gracie Mansion in New York City has been like the home of New York City's mayors since 1942, which was really interesting as well. So like their family's like pretty.
They got roots all over North America and Europe too, I guess. Yeah,
and even one of the original guys that came over from Scotland, one of his sons also fought really closely in the American Civil War with Robert E. Lee. So like they're pretty prestigious and just like well.
Is he on the south or the north?
Do you know what?
Robert E. Lee. The name sounds very familiar, but I don't know.
I feel like it's the north. If you're in New York, it would be you're fighting with the north. So, but I'm not really good at
right. Anyways,
American civil history.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
All I know is Gone with the Wind. So that's about it.
Yeah, based on a true story, but not.
Well, it kind of is. So, but anyways, so his great grandfather ended up in Rio in 1826, and his grandfather, Gastão Gracie, he managed this circus and he brought fighters from all over the world to do just like kind of prize fighting. And so eventually one of the fighters he brought over was a Japanese guy named, I'm not going to say it right, Hideo Medea. And this guy was like, he was trained in traditional jiu-jitsu and judo, like straight out of Japan. Yeah. And so he kind of helped this guy from Japan kind of build a community there in Rio. Or sorry, not in Rio, in Brazil. It was a different town.
Sure.
In Brazil. And so he kind of in turn was teaching the Gracie family all of like the traditional judo.
The judo, yeah.
And jiu-jitsu and that sort of thing. And then his Rickson's dad and uncles basically kind of modified it into this, like, so they could use it for like a no holds bar fighting, which is called it's called veil tudo. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it's like a no, like you just like anything goes kind of thing.
Right.
There's no time limits. It's just until whoever like kind of taps out or you submit the other person.
Yeah.
So, then the brothers in the 1920s, they moved to Rio, kind of open up their first jiu-jitsu academy there and start just kind of teaching this. And there was 5 brothers. So there was the original guy that owned the circus. He had 5 sons, and those sons were the ones that kind of basically started Brazilian jiu-jitsu or Gracie jiu-jitsu back in the day. And so the 2 main like their family tree is insane when you look it up on Wikipedia. So it becomes very, very confusing, all of the different people and brothers involved.
Yeah.
So, but basically the 2 main people are Carlos, who is the older brother, and then Helio. And so the 2 of them had a really close relationship, and they were basically the ones that kind of worked together to like get jiu-jitsu super, super popular and like really refined. And so, and like he says Helio because Helio is his dad.
Okay.
And so he says Helio Gracie was to jiu-jitsu what Albert Einstein was to physics.
Right. Yeah.
So just like super, super, super high up. And so Helio was basically kind of like the physical guy behind it, like all of like the different holds and maneuvers and whatever, all that kind of stuff. While Carlos was kind of like the nutritionist and like philosopher, basically. Yeah. So he was the one that came up with, I don't know if you've heard this, like the Gracie diet.
No, I haven't. So,
and basically it's like, I think it's more like balancing blood pHs. I don't know much about that. I don't know if it's too, but the basic thing is like they always ate really, really well. Like no sugar, no processed junk, no drinking, like none of that kind of stuff. That's all
basically the same.
Yeah.
In terms of like, don't eat processed foods, eat whole natural foods, whatever. Yeah. And I'm sure there's mixes there where like how much fruits and
everything was
whatever,
you could only eat certain things so that the whole pH of your meal was like balanced.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's just healthy stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm always of the mind, if you just eat natural, healthy food, and if your goal is to just not be the top jiu-jitsu person or the top Olympian, you're fine. That's you're better than 99% of the people out there anyways, eating McDonald's and all that junk, right? So,
but I think like the whole kind of point of that is like you have these kind of 2 halves bringing this whole together, which was really cool. It's not just about like fighting and submitting people. It was about like almost like a whole holistic philosophy.
Well, that's the whole thing about martial arts, and one of the reasons why I kind of love the whole idea and the concept behind it. And when you study it for a long time, it's like you do see the opposites, and you always have the yin and yang and all that kind of stuff. And now there's all kinds of different things other than just fighting and just pummeling your opponent as well. I don't know if you remember that movie Hero with Jet Li, and they're kind of talking about, he's talking about like the philosophy or whatever, and then the king's kind of explaining what he sees in the guy's painting, and he's like, oh, at the end, the person studies, becomes a swordsman, whatever, and then does the war, whatever, and then he gets to the point where he's finally so knowledgeable enough that like he doesn't need the sword. So it's like you get to that point where you're so well and studied and disciplined and whatever that you don't even have to use it, or you just know that because you can literally beat someone up or kill someone like that, you kind of walk away from it. You don't engage, right? So anyways, it's the philosophy of martial arts is really fascinating. So
it's really awesome. And Carlos was super eccentric, like not just like his ideas about psychology and his philosophies and stuff and eating and everything. He was like very eccentric. He had been married 2 times and lost both of his wives, and then I think because of those horrible losses, he he was like, well, I don't love any woman, and both him and Helio said this. I don't love any woman because it's weakness, which is, I completely disagree with that. I think love is our biggest strength. But anyway,
are you gonna go all Interstellar with the whole love?
Yeah.
The only thing that transcends space and time is love.
But so after these 2 losses of his wives, he marries another woman, and then he decides, I'm just gonna have as many kids as I can, and hopefully,
why not?
And try for as many boys as possible, so I can make this like great big like Jiu Jitsu
empire
clan.
Spoiler alert! It worked.
It worked. So, and he said the same thing to Helio. He encouraged Helio to do the same thing, like just have as many kids as you can. So between the 2 of them, they fathered 30 children with 8 different women, and 21 of those kids were males. And
out of 30.
And if you look at you can look it up on Wikipedia, you can look up like the Gracie family tree.
That's how it gets crazy.
Yeah. Most of them, their names all start with R's.
Oh yeah.
Like it's not, there's Rickson, Royce, Rolls, Rorian. Like it's nuts. Like it's so crazy. So his dad.
So hang on. No. I mean, this is probably a little too much in the weeds, but so they had 30 kids between the 2 of them with 8 different women. What were these? What was the final dynamic? Do we even care?
You don't care. I'll just say this one weird thing.
Like they're obviously not married, or are they all these wives?
Married.
Do they know each other?
They're
so they're
married.
They're polygamists.
No, not even. It's just different relationships.
Not polygamous. Polygamy is when the man has multiple wives, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I don't know the whole dynamic. But what it does get a little weird because Helio's wife, who they were married this whole time, I think it was mainly Carlos that was pretty like going like woman to woman. Helio was married to Rickson's mom like the whole time. They were just always together. But what's weird about this is Helio's wife couldn't have kids. And so Carlos was like, oh, well, just impregnate
other people,
this babysitter.
Oh, why not?
and so he does, and that's who his actual biological mom is this. And his 2 other brothers, it's the same thing.
From the same woman.
They're from the same woman who was a babysitter, but they were raised by Helios'
the mom, the
wife.
One. Yeah.
Even though she couldn't have kids, and it was like she even wore like a fake belly, like they pretended the whole thing like she was pregnant, and then when the baby was
really
born,
why did it do that for the kids, or for the whole family persona, like even to the outside world?
I don't know what, but just like she wore it. I think
like what years was this?
This is back in the 50s. So yeah, I don't know. Anyways, not only that, so him and his 2 older brothers were from that babysitter, and so Carlos also, because before this babysitter had these 3 boys.
How many those are the first 3 kids that he has had?
That he had, yeah. So before that happened, because his wife couldn't have kids, Carlos was just like, oh, well, I just had this baby, so you guys can have him. And raise him. So he was really close to this brother. His name's Rolls. That was his Rolls.
And Royce.
So that was like his older brother.
But not even like it's biological, really but like cousin.
His cousin.
Yeah. I'm like, what's the word for the person who's your father's brother has a kid? What is that name? Is there a name for this? I'm so confused. Like, I don't even understand.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it gets so confusing. And like, I'm reading this and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then you look on the family tree and you're like, what the fuck? So many people.
It's yeah. Anyway, like, I mean, I don't like, we talk a lot, offline about the total lack of community and family togetherness. And I kind of, in a way, I see the value, and I kind of like that. It's like, hey, listen, we're all just going to come together and we're all just going to raise a community of like-minded people that are all going to do great things. And it seems like, I mean, as long as everyone's got their head on straight and they're good people or whatever, I don't know them at all, and how they do, but it seems okay, right? Like it's better than a lot of these other families that are on drugs or whatever, or who knows what. You know what I'm saying, right?
Well, so like 100%. And so they would go to this.
It's not for me in terms of having, or well, maybe not. No. Just kidding. Like multiple women give birth to your kids and whatever. That's just too weird. But at the same time, if you have people that are with you and that you're all raising your own families together, so then you're, if we have 2 kids, but we're with like 4 other families, and then there's like 15 kids all together. They all can almost essentially be brothers and sisters to themselves, right? And be raised in that environment because that's all you need is like, you only need a few people that are close in your life.
Yeah.
That that they'll have your back no matter what,
And that was basically what happened. Like they would go, like they would stay in Rio and they would teach at the school, but then they had this like huge estate outside of Rio in the country that they would go to, like the whole all of the kids, and that's all they would do is they would just like fight each other, and that's what it's like, oh, you're up, you guys gotta fight. And so it was always like this competitions for like who's gonna
it's not so much fighting because they're
rolling. And so
you don't want to think people think that they're like actually fighting, but rolling.
But then it was always about who's the best and who's going to be the one to represent the Gracie family. And so that was a huge honor and something that all of the kids were striving to do to be the best of the best of the best. And
something to know about jiu-jitsu, if you've never done it before, if you're practicing like every day for like an hour or 2, it'll take you months and months, if not years, even just to get to the point where you just don't suck. Yeah. Like it is so hard. Yeah. Like I've been, like I said, on and off for a year, and I'd go to classes, 3 to 6 times a week, and I sucked. Every time. It doesn't matter how many times you practice. If you're somebody who's better than you, they're gonna make you tap out every single time, and you feel like dejected, like you're never learning anything, but you don't know. Yeah. It's very complicated. It is such a mind game. Yeah. And it's like a chess match between whatever, and you have to think like 10 moves ahead. Yeah. It is so good for your body, and it's so good for your mind, and with problem solving and everything. It is an amazing, amazing sport. And what I love about it too, as opposed to like Muay Thai, which I've done a lot of too, is you're not taking like punches to the head and all that kind of stuff, right? No. And you're not, and your brain is the most, precious thing that you want to protect in combat sports. Yes. So there's none of that. I mean, of course, there's danger, and of course there's risks, but I mean, it's in terms of a lot of the other martial arts, it's really good because you're just like wrestling and hugging and rolling around, and arm barring people and choking them out and stuff. Getting balls in
your face.
Yeah, well, if you like that kind of thing, I guess it's okay. But honestly, when you're rolling around, you don't even notice that. Like I said, when I'm rolling around, you're with other girls or whatever. It's like you're just trying to think about a million different things and not to get choked out, and Yeah. It's not like, oh, what was that? It's like, what did I feel there? It's like, no, you have no time for that. Yeah. No time for that.
I always joke around when I say that.
I know, but it's funny. Yeah. It's on your bumper sticker.
It's your bumper sticker too.
Yeah, it is too.
He says though, like his dad, like they always made it fun, especially for the kids. Like it was never like a forced thing. And he talks about what he sees today with how parents are with kids in sports.
All kinds of sports. It's just they take parents suck the fun out of everything.
And so he says his dad was tough and demanding, but it was not to what he sees today. And he says like it was always made to be like fun. They wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that was really drilled into them was there was no shame in losing.
No.
There was no shame in losing. The only shame came from like quitting or like not fighting, like not standing up for yourself or other people or your family or like your family honor or whatnot. Mm-hmm. So when they first started, like the initial, and I don't know how it is like when you go to like a BJJ studio now, but back then the initial curriculum was like 40 self-defense classes. And so that's kind of how you would start when you went in. And it was more about like empowering the people that went, because it was all really, the point of jiu-jitsu is as someone smaller, you can use your
Brazilian jiu-jitsu though, you mean?
Yeah. So it's even if you're smaller, it's about using your strengths and your size to overcome someone who is even bigger than you.
Yeah, that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu. It's one of the few sports where somebody with a huge physical and physical stature or weight disadvantage can overcome that. Yeah. I mean, it's still hard. You're still a 100-pound person fighting a 200-pound person. It's going to have a hard time. But if you can just wrap around them and get them in a chokehold, that 200-pound person can't do anything,
exactly.
Right?
And so that was the point of doing those self-defense classes. First was to build, like, to mentally and physically and psychologically prepare that person. So it was giving kind of like a foundation of confidence before they moved into more
more advanced
detailed
techniques or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not like that where I went. And where I went, I wasn't so much as a fan, because you kind of just went into the class and they just kind of taught kind of random techniques or what have you, and then you kind of have to piece things together. So it wasn't like okay, you guys are all new, here's everything that you kind of need to know to get started, like basic moves or whatever. So I think there's pros and cons to both ways of learning, but I think that's where some gyms have a hard time keeping people, because they'll have the new people go in with a class with, they don't have like a beginner's class where it's like everyone signs up and does 3 months, and then you can go in, there's like the fundamentals.
Exactly. Well, and that's what kind of scared me away from going into it, because you were describing that to me and I was like, that's not how I learn things.
It's like, what do I do?
Yeah, like that's not how I learn things. Like I need to start at the beginning and like give me some like structured information about how, like what I'm supposed to be doing.
I could see both ways, because you just get in the ring. Let's see what happens, right? And just kind of learn that way. But it's piece by piece, because you can't just read a book and be like, okay, I got it, or like chess and just learn I don't know. It's kind of like chess where you learn how some pieces move or whatever, but then like putting it all together, it's like so far beyond just the initial movement. So it's a hard thing to teach. Anyways.
Yeah. So he started, obviously, like was doing like little rolling with other kids and whatnot. And he tells this one story where this one kid got him in a headlock and he like kind of panicked and he tapped out, and he was like really young. Like I think he was like maybe like 10 or 11 when this happened. And he was so pissed off at himself and so like upset at himself that he got his older brother Rolls to wrap him up tightly in a carpet and to not let him out for like a minute. And like he would keep like upping the time, and eventually he'd be like rolled up to to like overcome that like fear. But it's like for a kid at that age to just be like, well, this is what I need to do to like get comfortable. And what he says is sometimes it's not about escaping, but about finding whatever comfort you can in hell. And it's like,
that is so true. When you've experienced a 250-pound guy on top of you, smothering you, and like squeezing down on your face, and that you can't move and can't breathe. Well, you can breathe, but not, you have to, because you can't just bench press 250. Exactly. You have to use techniques, right? You need to find some way to find peace in that,
exactly,
because it is hard. It is very, very hard.
Yeah. He talks a lot about Rolls, his older brother Rolls, and Rorian, and about the type of teachers that they were to him, and how they were a really big influence on his teaching style as well when he started teaching jiu-jitsu. And he said, they got me to focus as much on the person as the techniques. Our father taught us that a good teacher taught techniques well, but that a great teacher taught what each individual student needed to learn. So he talks a lot about that, about when he eventually started teaching jiu-jitsu, how it wasn't just about these are the technique. It was like looking at the person as a whole, and like maybe this person needs a bit of like more confidence, and so this is where I need to kind of focus on them. So I just thought that's really like progressive, and that's how I try to even just teach in school with the kids. Like I loved that.
To get into one of their gyms by getting taught by an actual Gracie right now would just be so expensive.
Oh yeah.
Like I think a lot of like the stars and whatever, they go to those people because ones. I mean they can, but to find good teachers like that nowadays, there's like, I got a class, there's like 20 people. Here's the lesson for the day. Roll around. You're done. Yeah. Which is fine, right? But maybe it depends on how high level you are, and seeing if someone's going to stick with it too. Because why waste your time on someone who's not going to stick? Yeah. So, I don't know.
Yeah. So there was a big rivalry. Like I was saying, they would go and the kids would they would roll with each other. But there was a really big rivalry between Carlos's sons and Helios's sons. And so Rolls was because he was Carlos's son, but he lived with Helio.
When did he know about that?
I don't know. He doesn't say.
Yeah.
So, but he kind of was the one, like the peacemaker basically, and kind of made everybody
just chill
cool. Yeah, exactly. So that was interesting, and that'll kind of come up later. So he talks about living in Rio and in Copacabana and all of these things, which it sounds like back then it must have been like a crazy place to live, because he said it wasn't like like the US or Canada, where, you know, you have like the poor people's areas and like richer people's areas. He was just like, everything was just mixed together. And so by the time he was 12, he was or at 13, sorry, he was just like, I don't see the point in going to school anymore, because like I just want to be a fighter. So what am I wasting my time for? So he eventually left, and his dad didn't even get upset. He just said, well, I'll house you and feed you, but anything else you want, you have to make money and get yourself. So he was kind of had to be independent that way and make his own money. He does talk a little bit about, he got mixed up in some of the gangs in Rio. He sold drugs. And
the author. Okay.
Yeah. So he sold drugs and he got in.
Sorry, I was confused as to who we're talking about now. So we're just focusing on him.
Rickson. Yeah, it's his
the
book.
author. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he got mixed up in a gang.
Gangs and drugs. Selling
fighting,
drugs, not taking drugs.
Fighting. I don't think he did, maybe a little bit, but he never really got mixed up in it. One of his brothers did, and he saw what happened, and it wasn't great. So I think that kind of definitely discouraged him from going down that road as well. And I think because he really had it in his mind, he wanted to be this great fighter, and he wanted to represent the Gracie name. He wanted to be that Gracie representing. So that was his goal. So he was trying to focus on that as he got older. So it was interesting. And then, so Carlos's oldest son, I think Carlson, he eventually broke off. And this is where things start getting like a little contentious between the families, because some of the sons now are getting older and they're breaking off from Carlos and Helio, and they're having their own Jiu Jitsu schools. And this is where we get there's competition, obviously. Because
they want to get the students and make money, obviously.
And then they have, different philosophies, I think, start kind of coming out, and that sort of thing starts.
Different teaching styles, yeah.
So that sort of thing starts happening. So what does he say? Sorry. No, there's so much, like, it's like the family's just like, it's so huge. So yeah. So he says this one quote, and I'm just like, it like sums up basically like our whole podcast. He says, all right, curiosity coupled with courage allows you to go beyond your limits, venture into the unknown, and establish new limits that you never thought were possible. I was like, wow, you just summed up every book that we read.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So eventually he's able to beat Rolls, and Rolls was like the guy to beat, right? And he was really close to Rolls, and he feels it's like a weird kind of passing of the torch once he beats Rolls, and he can kind of feel the weight of that responsibility of now he's going to be the one to rep the family with fights and that sort of thing. Because it wasn't even just about winning fights. It was about proving that their techniques
and that fighting style was the best.
Yeah. And he talks a lot about that too, because like he says, like he eventually becomes a gym owner, and he's like, I can't just like own the gym and just teach and that's it. Like I actually have to go out and do the fights and just
compete at the competitions,
to show that what I'm doing works, and like it, and then so people can come. So wrestling, one of his brothers put a lot of energy into making a national Brazilian wrestling team, and he doesn't really like the whole wrestling because of the rules that are involved, and he felt that the rules were arbitrary and that the referees can be really biased. So he never really got into wrestling. He was like challenged a bunch of times later in his career, and he was just like, nah,
like to fight wrestling rules. Well, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. So
that's why things like, sorry to interject, but like things like UFC, it's almost the purest form of fighting you can get, where there's no low blows or whatever, but you know what I mean? There's not very many rules.
Yeah.
So that the best fighting style will tend to win, which is what the early UFCs were so crazy, because you'd have like a strict, I'm only going to do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu versus I'm only going to be a wrestler, or I'm only a boxer. Like it's crazy and then now it's all mixed martial. It's all everything, right? So it's fascinating. But yeah, like why fight someone on their own rules with your style, because it's not a fair comparison of what style is going to be better.
Yeah. And so his main goal was, he was still like pretty young, like 19 at this point, and he really wanted to do like a big promoted like veiled tudo fight, so like no holds barred kind of fight. And so one of his dad's kind of like old nemesis, I don't know how to say Nemesis calls him up and says he has a fighter that no one can beat this guy. And so his dad was going to put another brother forward, but Rickson was just like, no, I want to do this one. Like, I want to go represent the family. I want to fight this guy.
Yeah.
So he's only 19. And so he's 19. And I mean, he's not a big guy. Like, I don't know how tall he is. Let me see if I can find it. So he's 5'10" and like 185 pounds about. Yeah. So he's gonna fight this guy, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy, because this fight obviously was like in 1980. So this is like basically his first big fight, and it's against this guy called King Zulu. I don't know if you ever heard.
The name sounds familiar, but I can't put it to anything.
So this guy was 33. Rickson's 19. This guy's 33, 6'4", and 230 pounds.
Yeah, and probably a lot more fights and experience under his belt.
Hadn't lost since 1963, and it's 1980.
What kind of fights is he doing?
So he wasn't a part of any academy or like martial art, but he combined, and you'll like this, he combined striking with capoeira footwork and with grappling. Yeah. And so maybe explain what capoeira is.
Well, you should. I don't know if they even talked about this, because capoeira, I think the origins is in Brazil or Afro-Caribbean or what have you. Yeah. And from my understanding, it was a martial art that was developed during slavery, where the slaves weren't allowed to do any kind of martial arts or whatever. So they hid their martial arts into a dance. So when you go do capoeira now, they have a thing called a roda, where they're playing music and whatever. And, they got the drums and whatever. I don't even know what these instruments are called. And then people are on there singing, and you have those two people. They don't fight, they don't touch each other, but they do all the kinds of moves, and it's I love it. I want to do it so bad. I don't think it's not the best martial art for like actually fighting, because you're just jumping around or whatever. But it's cool because I mean, handstands, like it's all like, it's like almost like calisthenics meets gymnastics meets martial arts, because the moves that they do, they're acrobatic. They do flips and cartwheels and tumbling, and I love it so much, because the stuff that they do is really just cool. It's just so elegant and beautiful, and I love it. But again, fighting somebody with no experience and you're going to do capoeira, you'll chop them down with one kick for sure. But in the ring or whatever, you don't see that people doing that, because it's jumping, taking away so much energy, just doing the Jenga or whatever it's called. But it's a really, really cool martial arts, again, kind of based in or started in Brazil, I think. Yeah. Or South America somewhere. But no, it's really cool. So I saw that little thing. I was like, I have to mention that, because you'll think it was cool. I love capoeira. So he goes through the first round. The first round is a really rough go. He gets into everything that happened. I won't get into it, because it's if you're not into like fighting, like again, it's a bit much. So they obviously they can do striking and everything like that too. So he has to figure that out. So
it's whatever.
It's just no rules, right?
No rules,
so those kinds of those jiu-jitsu guys, they need to understand. That's why it's important to learn striking, whatever, so you know how to defend yourself when you're up, and you can find the right time to attack the opponent and take them down on the ground. Yeah, exactly. Because on the ground, that's where your striking has nothing, and then you're in trouble. But this other guy is a well-rounded fighter, anyways, right? So which is what you need, anyways.
So he's having a really hard time. His dad and his brother are cornering
on
him
the first round. Do you know the time limit on the rounds? Like 5-minute rounds, maybe?
I'm not sure actually how long the rounds are. Yeah. But he was like, he wants to give up. It's like the first time in his life he's ever felt this way. He just like wants to give up.
He's getting pounded probably.
And his dad and his brother are just like ignoring everything he's saying and just like getting him ready to go out for the second round. And he realized at that point, like, he only had two options. Either I'm going to die, or like I take this guy out. Like those are the only two options here. And so he took him down in 3 minutes in the second round.
How so? He probably just
I don't know.
Grappled him and got him into some kind of choke and submission.
I don't remember from reading that. Yeah. So he realized at that point, like, he was grateful to his brother and his dad, but he realized, like, I can't, like, I need to find it within myself. I can't rely on other people to get me up and out. Like, I have to find that motivation from within somehow. And so he realized that an insecure state of mind would cripple me as a fighter. If I could control my mind, I could improve every aspect of my performance. And he realized it's not that you would break physically, but like emotionally and mentally you could break down before physically you're done.
Right. I mean, a fight is lost. A lot of people say the fights are won and lost even before you even enter the ring. It's a big mental state. But even beyond that, let's take that philosophy and let's just transport it into like life and what people do. Yeah. Like, you have to have that attitude of, if something goes wrong in your life, that you have to take charge and take control and figure out how you can silence your own doubts and whatever to be able to get yourself out of these situations.
Yeah.
You know, there's how many stories do you hear of somebody lost their job, but then they go and spiral into depression, or, you know, whatever happens in their family. And, you know, tragic as they may be, you know, but they let themselves go and whatever, and they just kind of fall and kind of collapse, and they can't handle these things that happen to you. That has to do with your own mental strength and mental resilience to be able to figure out how to structure your mind in a way that it can handle things that that are difficult, I guess. It's really hard to do. And I think that's why I think everyone, like, you know, in school I had gym class, and like, forget gym class, everyone should take at least 6 months to a year of martial arts training, just because of not only the physical aspect, but the mental aspect of being able to overcome obstacles. Like, again, like you're getting choked out or whatever. It's like you have to be able to be comfortable in that discomfort to be able to think and solve problems when there's so many things happening around you.
I think the other thing that's interesting about martial arts, and I mean, every podcast person I listen to, from Joe Rogan to Andy Stumpf to Jocko,
it's like 3 people,
they all, but like, I'm just giving a couple of examples, but like all of the people, they all do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. They all talk about how awesome
among other things too.
But I think the big thing that they also talk about is how your ego gets fucking checked. And you're just like, you don't, like, you have to let it go at the door. And so most people that do jiu-jitsu, like, they don't have big egos, like the MMA fighters. They're not these like big, oh, I'm awesome, I'm everything.
Some of them
are Conor McGregor. but for the most part, it's like the really, because you're getting your ego checked all the time by being taken down, but you still have but you also still have that confidence, and then it's building it, like you were saying,
the
community
and the humbleness as well too, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So after that fight, he's trying to find something that mentally, emotionally, spiritually, he can kind of tap into to help him with that piece of the fighting. And so he finds this new class. It sounds kind of weird to me when he's describing it, and I'm not going to say it correctly, but it's called biogymnastica, and it's developed by this guy called Orlando Canny. And so the whole purpose of this like movement system was to get people to move and breathe like animals in order to discover their natural instincts and become sensitive and intuitive. It sounds kind of airy-fairy, but it was basically about reestablishing like a mind-body connection. Yeah. And so he was eventually able to really work on his breathing and enter this like meditative state, and moving and breathing at the same time. And he goes pretty deep into it in here. I won't really get into it. Yeah. But the breathing was what was most important. And he said, most people, when they're breathing, when you're using your diaphragm to breathe, you're using like less than 50% of your lung capacity. So
if you don't use your diaphragm?
No. When just regular people, you have to use your diaphragm to breathe.
Okay.
So most people it's like less than 50% capacity that they're using. But the breathing and the techniques that he was using in this, you're getting like 80% capacity. So you're getting more oxygen. And so I think that obviously
so it becomes second nature.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, I mean, all this stuff, like, yeah, I don't know. Some stuff is a little bit weird, but I do think there is something to, like, you hear stories of people that have practiced breathing for like, you know, I was in a cave for 10 years and I came out and I'm so attuned to my body that I can stop blood flow at certain whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I believe any of those stories, but there's a point where people are so in tune with their body that it becomes second nature, and how they breathe, and they can really regulate things. Yes. I don't understand how that is, and I think you just have to spend so much time figuring it out, because there is something to it. Because I remember even taking a couple singing classes, and it's all about the right posture. Breathe with this, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking? I don't know how to do that kind of stuff, right? So just something that you need to practice constantly to be able to get better at. And I'm sure there are lots of things that we do that are super inefficient because we never really trained and really tried to figure that stuff out. Yeah.
And he attributes most of his success to once he kind of mastered this whole breathing process. And so I found that like kind of
breathing is so important, especially when you're fighting. I mean, number one thing is you're just gassed and you're out of oxygen. Yeah. Right. And you can't clear all that lactic acid, all that kind of stuff. And of course, if you're rolling around and you're getting squished and people are trying to choke you out, I mean, yeah. Although getting choked out is different. It's not a lack of oxygen. it's lack of blood flow to the brain, which is why when you get choked out, you're out unconscious in like a couple seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
which is very unpleasant. I've never been choked out to blackout, but pretty close, and you feel like, oh,
yeah,
the lights are going off.
Well, what does Goggins say? It's meeting the wizard is what they were calling.
Oh, when he blacks out.
Yeah, when they're in the pool doing that.
Right.
Stuff,
Yeah, I don't know.
The wizard.
Yeah, I can't remember what he says.
Yeah.
But that's from. And then he's like, I just found the extra gear and kept going. It's like, what? I don't get it. Anyways.
So he does eventually get married. His wife Kim, she was like a model and like I think she was a pro surfer, just beautiful. And they had a son, Rickson, and then 2 more girls, and then their youngest son, Kron. And so that obviously not till later, but he wanted. I think he had good intentions. He didn't want to be like his father and his uncle. He didn't want to be like philandering and whatever, but that didn't happen. He had multiple affairs. And so, so that obviously put a huge strain on their relationship. And I think she also
it should end it right there and then, but
nope, it didn't. And I think she, after they had like the first 2 kids, I think she felt quite like resentful because he just kept on going on like nothing had changed. He kept training and fighting and doing all these things, whereas like she basically like lost her career, like being a model and a pro surfer, like that just kind of ended for her because she had these kids.
Yeah, I mean the modeling ends pretty quickly anyways, just through the passage of time.
Yeah.
Which is hard for a lot of women.
Yep.
But
absolutely.
But the surfing could go on for longer. But yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, anyways, it's not a relationship advice podcast per se, but communication is a little bit in order here. I think, I don't know. Yeah. But it's all, we're talking what, 90s at this point? 80s? Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah.
So then Rolls dies in 1982 in a hang gliding accident.
Who's that one? One of his brothers.
So Rolls was Carlos's son that lived.
The half one.
With Helio.
Not the half, but his cousin. But yeah.
So
don't say like the half one. It's so weird.
But his death, obviously, he was kind of like I was saying, he was the peacemaker, right?
Right.
And so when he died, it even fractured the family. And then what happened is Rolls's widow gave his academy to Carlos Jr., who was Carlos's son, rather than to Helio. So that made the fracture even deeper, and then he became Helio's like biggest rival within like the jiu-jitsu community in Rio. So, and they had really different ideas and kind of philosophies of how they wanted to teach and things like that. So, because Helio was just like wanting to teach like for self-defense, whereas Carlos wanted it
self-offense.
Well, he wanted to be like more like a competitive sport and and like sport jiu-jitsu and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they're both valid concerns and philosophies and ways to go about it for sure.
Yeah. So he tries to go to Japan to do some fighting to do jiu-jitsu in Japan because this is where it originated, and he wanted to maintain that kind of purity, and he just wanted to do these veil tudo fights, and it was difficult to get any of these fights in North or South America, but in Japan, that's where it was. The problem was really complicated because of the Yakuza, the Japanese mob,
the crime family or whatever.
Yeah. And many of the fights were like fixed fights because of all the gambling involved. And so eventually his dad convinces him to move to California to help his son, his brother Rorian, Rorian's an older brother, to promote Brazilian jiu-jitsu there.
Out west. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in this, again, there's more like infighting there. Like Rorian was kind of like the head of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in the US, but people were getting sick of his attitude because he was just like, well, you have to run everything by me. He even sues them for using some of the other cousins for using the Gracie names in their academy, and that's why eventually it got renamed to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and not Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
So, and not only that, like he sponsored Rickson and Kim when they moved to California, and
because they're from they weren't American.
No.
Yeah.
And so like any money that he made from fighting or teaching or anything had to go to him. But like Rorian, like they didn't see much of that money coming back to them, so he was getting sick of it too. So there was all of these like all of these kind of like fractures and like infighting that happened.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because you would think growing up so tight, maybe it's not as tight or glamorous as it was made to seem, or at least from what I've heard here, you know.
Yeah. And so eventually, like, Kim had some money saved up, so eventually they use her money and he opens up his own studio. And he talks a lot about too, like we were talking about, kind of your ego being stripped away when you roll with somebody. But he also talks about like how it wasn't, his academy was a neutral place, so you could be like a cop and like someone who's like
a robber,
cop and robber, and you get to the mat, but it's like all that has to be left at the door, and it's just about this.
There's two people that are trying to better themselves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was Rorian's dream to bring Vale Tudo to the US. And so in 1993, this is when he co-founds the UFC with, I forget the other guy. And so the first UFC fight is in Denver. And instead of picking Rickson to be the first fight, Rorian picks Royce.
Yeah, so, Royce Gracie, I think maybe that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's not really happy, but he's kind of pissed. Like he's literally the best out of all of them fighting. So I think it was kind of like a fuck you to Rickson for opening up his own studio and trying to do his own thing. Yeah. So, but Rickson ends up being like Royce's coach and corner guy in this fight. And so at this very first fight, there's no gloves, there's no weight divisions, there's no rounds, there's no time limits. It's just like just fight.
Yep.
And so Royce was 175 pounds and he was going up against guys that were over 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. And he's beating them all.
Yeah.
So and so for this first UFC, like people are like, it's becoming like very clear the power and efficiency of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is like, it's becoming huge.
Yeah.
And then Royce obviously would become like the biggest name in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because he was the first winner of UFC. So,
yeah.
But what Rickson saw though was that this UFC was making it into he doesn't use the word farce, but like making Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into more like entertainment rather than, and he almost compares it to like WWF or whatever it's called now. Not quite that point, but there's like heroes and villains, and the United States audiences didn't understand really about how the fighting would go. They didn't understand that like fighting style of what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, because a lot of the time it is just grappling. It's not those strikes that they're used to seeing in boxing.
Yeah, because when you're seeing people roll out, you don't understand when you see like a pure brilliance of a move.
Yes.
Because people are like, I don't even know what the hell just happened, right?
Yes.
You know, I need Joe Rogan to be able to be like, oh, what a move he did there. And it's like, really? I don't know what just happened. You know what I mean? So maybe there's that aspect of it. Is that what you kind of mean in terms of
yeah. And like the audiences, like you say, they wanted to see a barroom brawl. They weren't interested in seeing like the grappling moves on the ground, the submissions as much as they really wanted people to like just punching.
I think nowadays though, people are more aware of what the techniques are and how things go, and And so he was offered a fight in Japan. And so Kim kind of becomes his like de facto manager and kind of sets up the fights and the contracts and all that kind of stuff. Are they okay here?
Well, there's still issues with them, but they're still together. But this leads to like a lot of issues between him and Kim and then his dad, Helio, because the dad thinks, and the dad's in Brazil at this point, but he thinks that Rorian should be the one in charge and managing all of this, whereas like Rorian, like they can't trust Rorian because he's not giving them back the money
or whatever.
And so so eventually he goes to Japan and he fights I forget what the thing is called in Japan. I forget what it's called in Japan, but like it's one of the biggest like jiu-jitsu tournaments in Japan, and it is like a no holds bar, so it's more what he's looking for. And he only fought professionally in Japan because of he really identified with like that samurai Bushido code of like honor and respect and loyalty and honesty, and like you're fighting for like your family's honor, and that was huge to him, and so that's why he only fought there. And even the audiences there, they like after he won, he made this big speech of like how honored he was to be in Japan fighting in front of the Japanese people and fighting in the ways of the samurai and all that stuff. And so the people in Japan, like, they absolutely adored him because he was so respectful of that culture.
Yeah.
So that was
and the traditions of the sport.
tradition. Yeah. So it was really, really, it was really, really cool. So I loved that. Like, I loved that for him. So, and so he tells this other story. It's so funny. So one of Japan's, so he wins this whole thing, and it's kind of like a little bit of a fuck you because he's Brazilian, and what is he doing winning this like Japanese competition? And so one of Japan's most famous pro wrestlers challenges him, but he doesn't respond because he thinks, oh, it's just a publicity stunt. This guy just wants, because I'm kind of like famous now, this guy just wants to attach his name to me, right?
Right.
And so he doesn't respond. Then this guy keeps like chirping. And so eventually he just says, and he's like, well, I'm not like, I don't fight wrestlers. All wrestling matches are just, they're all fixed with the referees. And I've never fought wrestling. Like, I'm not going to fight you.
Yeah.
And he said, but I would be willing to fight you in the next Japanese Open, or we can just like fight on the streets, basically. Like, come at me, bro.
Okay.
Basically. Right.
All right.
So the guy who challenged him, his protege, ends up traveling to LA. They call Rickson at his house, and they're like, this guy just showed up with his like entourage from Japan, and he wants to fight you. And so Rickson's like in his pajama pants, and he drives over to his academy, and the guy's there.
The guy's protege or the actual guy?
The guy's protege. And so he's there with a bunch of Japanese press as well. And so the guy, like Rickson's like, yeah, let's go. We'll fight. But none of the press is coming in. Like, I don't want this to be a publicity thing for you. Like, no. Yeah. He ends up filming it though. Like, one of his people films it in the academy. So yeah, who eventually he just like decimates.
Probably submits him in like 10 seconds kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He breaks his nose. Both of his eyes are swollen. Like, the guy's just, he chokes him out. And so, and he's like, oh yeah, this guy got off easy. And so.
Oh, of course. He come to my house like that?
Yeah. And so.
And he's going to keep talking.
Yeah. So then the guy goes back to Japan, and he just totally lies about everything. He said, oh, they jumped me. I went to his academy to, say like, let's fight. And his whole students, all of his group, they just jumped me and whatever. And so Rickson's like, well, this is a bunch of bullshit. And by the way, here's the tape. Yeah. So anyway,
lying never gets you anywhere, kids.
Yeah. And so eventually he does. The only person, but it's like, it's almost like a movie, right? Like one of these like reclaiming honor and all this stuff.
Well, do you remember the movie Ip Man with Donnie Yen?
No, I never watched that.
That's one of my favorite martial arts movies. I love Donnie Yen. But anyways, yeah, some guy comes in and he's like, I want to fight you. And he comes into town and he's like in the house and he's like, maybe we'll have supper first. And then the wife's like, all right, make it quick. Just tune this guy up and show him up fast. But yeah, it's like those old school martial arts movies. It's hilarious.
Yeah. And he says, if I'm fighting for money, I'll stop hitting you when you or the referee asks me to. If we are fighting for honor, I'll stop hitting you when I feel like it. Yoji Anjo, the protege, invaded my academy and disrespected me in front of my students. I needed to make an example of him.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he says too, he's like, could you imagine if I showed up and at someone's like in Japan at someone's academy and like, no, like that wouldn't happen.
If you go on YouTube, you can see it now where if you just type in, I don't know, people disrespecting academies, so many people will go in, like, some people go in like Freddie Bravo's gym or whatever and start talking smack and he just like chokes them out on camera. Like there's people that will go into gyms and like try to tune people up. Even in Sudbury, there was a guy who was telling the story. He's like, oh yeah, like this one guy kind of came in. He's like, oh, I'm all tough. Yeah, I'm going to take out all the students, whatever. So he's like, I had to tune up that guy. Like, it happens all the time in gyms because guys come in thinking that they're the shit. Yeah. And then the guy's like, I ain't going to fucking have this. You ain't coming to embarrass my students or whatever. Try to,
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
It's, I don't know. It's a guy thing. You don't understand?
Probably not. No, but I get it though.
No, wow.
I do get it. And that's why.
Well, women just do it in a different way.
Yeah, in a super shady as
super
fuck way.
Backstab you behind the back and talk smack about you and ruin your reputation completely. Yeah. The other guys are like, we're just gonna fight about this and get it over with. And maybe have some beers later.
Yeah, exactly. So eventually the only person who can reclaim the honor that was lost there is the actual guy. So he takes him down. So like the main guy.
So he fought the other Japanese guy and won as well.
Yeah. And so he does, he wins another, the second Japanese Open. And the one thing he does say that I really liked, because you talked about it as being like chess, like a chess game, and that Rogan says that a lot. It's like it's chess. And he also says it's artistic because it requires creativity, passion, and instinct. So I like that too, because I really think like, and Rogan talks a lot about this about Eddie Bravo, saying like he's very creative and he's really good because of his creativity, because he sees things differently. So
you have to,
it's
because
really, it's really cool.
I think George St. Pierre talks a lot about that as well too, because he's pound for pound one of the best fighters as well too, and he's just a machine in there. He's amazing. And
so so that fight against the protege's mentor, his Nobuhiko Takada, was the first Pride.
I love Japanese names. I can't pronounce it. I want to say it too, because it's
so cool. But that was the first Pride event, and so he basically got that like Pride. I don't know what it is. I don't even know if they're around anymore. But like Pride fighting was like, I think it was like a UFC, and there was Pride, and then there's another one, I think.
Okay, so Pride was like another organization of fighting. Okay,
and
but so it's not a thing anymore.
I don't know if it is a thing or not. I would have to look that up. But
so maybe it's gets confused now with like the Pride movement or whatever too. It's like something completely different. So it's
that too. But anyway, so that fight was the first one for that Pride fighting organization. And so he defeated him by mounting him and locking an arm bar in 4 minutes and 47 seconds.
Well, that's the thing. As soon as you figure out how to get into someone's defenses or whatever, you don't stand a chance. But then again, this guy also knows jiu-jitsu too, right? So, but it's different. I don't know what the original Japanese style of jiu-jitsu is as compared to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I thought Brazilian jiu-jitsu is really focused on like submissions, and it really focuses on like the joints and like locking all the joints, and then of course constricting your motions of on the neck. So it's like, how do you immobilize your opponent as quickly as possible? And like when you get into something, you can do so much damage. Like you make somebody like not walk again because you can tear out all their ligaments in their legs, and like it can be very, very brutal. And he talks a little bit about the difference between MMA and Veil Tudo. And he says MMA is a game. Veil Tudo is a war. If the rounds are 5 minutes, you can go 100% because you know that in 5 minutes, you're going to get a few minutes to recover. You build an entire strategy around that break. You also know that your opponent is in your weight division, so he can't radically overpower you. So it's really interesting too, like that different take on it. And I think the challenge for him with Veil Tudo, I think that's why it was more what he was into. So that's like the kumite and the blood sport with Jean-Claude Van Damme, right? Where it's just basically anything goes, bell goes, you just fight till there's a winner. That's probably the purest
form of it,
of fighting. And is there any rules to like low blows at all?
I think there probably is. That might be with eye gouges and stuff too. Like I don't know. He doesn't.
Like those might be like eye gouging or like biting. But like in a real fight, I don't know. Someone grabs you, you bite them.
And he's making lots of money by this point too. He moves away from doing these like opens where you have to fight like a bunch of different people to just doing like single fights. And so he does this one fight in Japan for like $1.5 million, which is pretty huge. And this guy that he fought was 10 years younger and 40 pounds heavier, and he beats him.
Well, think of it now when you have a big card fight, especially for boxing, what did like Mayweather, like it makes almost like 50-60 million a fight or whatever it is.
Unreal.
I mean, you're getting punched in the face all the time, and your lifespan is probably going to be a lot less than normal, but there's a shit fucking ton of money. His oldest son Rickson kind of goes out of control. He gets involved in some gangs and ends up getting murdered in New York City. They actually can't even find his body for a long time, and they find out it was like buried in like a what's called a potter's grave, where like they don't know who it is, and so the city basically pays for the burial because they don't know who it is. So it took him a really long time to get over
Roxanne's death. He at first like didn't want to deal with it, didn't want to talk about it, and then eventually like he begins to kind of recover from Roxanne's death and thinks,
how does his wife take it?
Pretty hard. But I think she was able to move forward a bit better than he was. So, but then eventually he, I think, kind of comes to some realizations after Roxanne's death, and he divorces Kim and he moves back to Brazil. I don't know, but I don't think he fought again after. He was supposed to do a fight like right after Roxanne's death, and obviously he canceled. And I don't think he's done any like big fights since.
When was
death.
This?
I'm not sure, actually. I don't know. Like in the 2000s. I think like, so sorry, like 2003, 2004, kind of like around that. So, so he moves back to Brazil and he ends up doing seminars like all over the world about jiu-jitsu and kind of going back to like what he really enjoyed, which was like teaching and, you know, being like kind of personalizing. And even like when he was doing seminars, he would like personalize it depending on the people he was talking to and that sort of thing.
You get old enough too that you just don't want to start getting pounded in the face all the time and everything like that too. Yeah.
And one thing that he really wanted to do, that he was trying to make his mission, was to think about ways on how to unify Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because it was so fractured because of the family and all of the different factions that kind of came out. And he wanted to have like a more regulated approach to awarding belts, because I've heard a lot of
even now it's way out there.
Like some people get belts and maybe they shouldn't, and that sort of thing.
I think where I went, it was pretty good because I didn't even get a stripe at all, and I was doing it for quite a while. And when you're white belts, you got to get 4 stripes before you get your blue belt. And any gym that gives a blue belt anywhere before like 5 years, that's very suspect. And some of them go like, oh, well, once you do 500 hours, you just get your blue belt. It's like, no. That's not what happens. It takes like anything longer or shorter than like maybe 15 years to get your black belt. It's like highly suspect, unless that person's like literally in the gym all day, every day. Yeah. But like a normal person just taking 2-3 classes a week, if you get your black belt faster than 15 years, there's, you know, it's not that it's not legit or whatever, but
it's suspect.
It takes a long time. I could be off on that, but I remember like Ed O'Neill, the guy married with children or whatever. He's got a legit black belt, and it took him 16 years to get his black belt. I think so. Yeah, and he was doing it. I mean, he's got the resources, right? So he could take classes. He was taking with he's with one of the Gracies. I can't remember. He's on YouTube or whatever. So cool. Now probably one of the sons of. I don't know, right? Because it's more recent, right? Yeah, exactly, right. So that's why I was confused as to who's whatever and like the time frames and whatever. But
so he also and I really liked this. He said, he was talking about how like in the old days when they first began their academies, like when his dad first had the academy, like they were doing those 40 initial kind of self-defense classes, and he said he believed that like today there's so many, like there's frustrations when you're first starting, like we were just saying, and there's injuries. I've heard about, you even had injuries, shoulder stuff, all kinds of stuff. And then egos, he says that today's students encounter when they attempt to learn jiu-jitsu, and it'll scare most people away. So he didn't want that to happen, like, and that was, he wanted to kind of get back to, let's do those like first kind of confidence building things so we can retain people and build that confidence.
And as a business owner, that's a lot of problems I think people have, is they don't know how to retain initial students, because most people that come into the door, 90% of them are gone.
And what he says is even worse. It filters out those who need it most, the weak and the insecure, because you don't want to go back if you feel like, and because a lot of, or not even that, but just some of the gyms too, you have the guys in there with they're like, hey, they got the testosterone and they got the ego, and they're like, hey, I'm whatever, and they don't make it a welcoming environment as well too. So but that's also all from the top down, right? Like the top guys need to tell the people that are there, like, when you're here, you're humble, we're all the same, we're not on other levels. But some places and some people, they're not like that. So it's like, I don't want to train here. Why would I want to train here? A bunch of people making me feel like I'm an asshole because I'm learning, like. Well, and it's the same thing if you go into a gym and all you see is these like crazy people just like doing crazy noises when they're like lifting, and it's like it makes you feel really awkward.
But even that's okay. But you see a lot of the shit stuff now on, you know, YouTube, or I would say TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but you see some of the videos on YouTube where people will just see somebody doing something like in a really bad form and they just like film it and like make fun of them. It's like,
I know,
help the person out, right? They don't know what they're doing. Just help them out. Like, oh, just make fun of them. It's like, no,
so
that's why people
don't
like to go to the gym, because, you know, the people that go to the gym that have been going for a while and like actually actively help other people that see like, oh yeah, I don't quite know how to do my bench press properly or my deadlift or whatever, and they actually help. That's when you feel more inviting or whatever, because we're all trying to get better and try to improve ourselves. And let's all do this together. I mean, that gym should be a place where that should be the most welcome, but it's like the opposite. It's like, oh, get out of here. You don't know what you're doing. You're taking my space. It's like, I need to work out now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, no, we're all trying to do this. And that's a big problem. And I think that's a problem with martial arts today as well too, when you go into certain gyms. So if you are looking to find your gym, I would just don't go to the first one and just be like, I'm going to go here. Take the first introductory free lesson or whatever from a few different gyms, or if you're lucky enough to be in a city that has different gyms, and see what you like and see how the environment is. And if you don't even care what martial arts, there's different types of martial arts. Go check it out. See what the people are like, and see who has a more sense of community. And, you know,
what's really interesting too is Andy Stumpf, who I think he's a purple belt now, but he's been doing it for a while too, and he loves it. He just got married, and his wife actually is a black belt, and she teaches, and I think she's won a bunch of championships as well. And both the two of them, this was like a couple years ago now, they were on Jocko's podcast, and she was specifically talking about what it's like to be female within the BJJ community and what to look for and how to deal with certain situations if you feel uncomfortable. And they actually run like a women's only class.
They are women's only classes.
Yeah. So that's another thing I think that would be something like I would feel more comfortable doing and like initially. And she says most women like initially that's what they do, and then they go into like the free rolls or whatever. So yeah, so I think that's something to look for. And she as like the coach, she looks for men that are kind of being shifty or that go right toward like the smallest female in the class to roll with. Like,
why would you do that?
She is aware, and she gets that guy before he can kind of go with somebody else. So even like as the coach, she's being aware of what's happening too. Yeah. So I think that's important. Yeah. But that was actually a really good podcast that I listened to. Yeah. So I'll put that link really there. Cool. But he says, I believe that jiu-jitsu is especially important for people today because it forces them to connect with another human being. That's why I believe my most important mission is to use its practices to rehumanize people, learning to breathe, physically connect, engage, detach, and disengage. These primal processes require people to trust their senses more than their thoughts, and in doing so, reconnect them with their bodies. So I really loved that. The epilogue is his brother trying to give him a red belt, and so a red belt is. You can't get a red belt until you're like 65. Like you have a black belt and you're 65. And so he was just like, you know, thank you, but no thank you. And they wouldn't let it go. And so he was just like, you know what, and he knew he wasn't going to win the argument with his brothers.
Because he didn't want
it because he wasn't 65. And so he was just like, you know what, I'm just going to take it and I'll put it in my like vault or whatever, safe until I'm 65, and then I'll wear it. Right. So even like that integrity, I thought was just like, you can tell like it's more than just the accolades. It's like a whole lifestyle philosophy.
Well, is that the rule or whatever that they came up as the organization that you have to be 65 years old?
I think so.
To get it?
Yeah.
But is it one of those things though, but it's 65 or maybe like 40 years experience plus certain levels and techniques and whatever?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Yeah.
Red belts are always the coolest, and they have lots of different belt structures in capoeira, and that's the thing too. Once you like the whatever the masters, you know, the old guys, they're like the red belts, and so you're the wise, you know, lots of knowledge and information to be passed on.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, so that is the book, and that's the story.
That's the book
of Rickson Gracie. He did actually get remarried when in Brazil. His wife is much younger than him.
That a boy. Yeah. Oh, well, how much younger?
think like 20 years.
That's the way it is. Yeah. Well, you got money, you got fame.
Yeah.
It's like Leonardo DiCaprio. Once they hit 26,
Oh, Jesus.
you gotta upgrade to the next.
Oh my God.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Post a link to it. It's the Ryan Long thing about Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, why does he always change girlfriends at 25 or 26?
He trades
and
up.
then he was like, what was his? He's like, we're going to start a new modeling or new talent agency in Hollywood. It was like,
yes.
It was the Dust or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
It's like women who are at 26 and 27.
Yeah.
You're still not done, in between the fact
that
that you need reading classes. We can still get work. Oh, it's so hilarious.
It was really funny.
Yeah, it was posted like that. That's hilarious.
It was hilarious.
But yeah, and it's a funny thing too about the whole differences. We talk a little bit about between men and women and how they deal with things. I mean, and you think about the difference between men and women too is like women are in their prime, late teenagers to 20s and late 20s, and then they're used to going into the room, all the guys are looking, whatever, they can have anyone they want or what have you. And then they tend to go for like the older, more successful, established males or whatever. So like, but the males, when you're young and whatever, you don't even have a chance. You know what I mean? So it's like women have their prime when they're younger, and then men have their prime like when they're older. It's just kind of like how it is. And yeah. Anyways, so that's a little aside. Yeah. But whatever. It's neither here nor there. I mean, but people do what they got to do. Yeah. I don't have any problems with that. It gets a little weird when you get to be more Ashton Kutcher when it's like 50 years difference or whatever. But this was good. Breathe. Rickson Gracie.
Oh yeah.
Great book. 1 to 10.
I think I'd give it like a 7.
Yeah.
A 7. It was really good. If you are really into jiu-jitsu and you really want to know, you're interested just like in the history and how it came to be.
The history of the Gracie family.
It's fantastic. Yep. Yeah. It's really, really good. And there's so much, like the family's insane, because even like the Machado, I'm not going to say it like Jean-Jacques Machado, like that guy, I think is
the
like
name again sounds familiar, but
yeah. Anyways, so there's like so many.
Yep.
There's so many connections and offshoots because again, they had 30 kids.
Yeah, that's a lot, and they all have kids now too, right?
Of course, because he's like in his 60s.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because they're all their kids. A lot of them have their own schools and stuff too. And like I said, it's all over North America. Like it's like, this is a gym, blah blah blah, Gracie certified or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was really great. I would love to.
Well, that's the next question. So philosophies or whatever incorporating into our life.
I would love. I just, I have my thing with like closeness.
Yeah, well, if you want to do, I want to have a jiu-jitsu, but
where nobody touches.
I just don't want any touching. Do that? Yeah, we do. Right here. Here's the door, ma'am. Please, you don't mind?
No, but I really think because I am really small, like being able to defend myself. I've always wanted to do something so I could defend myself, and I just never have done it.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we can do, I'm no teacher or what have you, but we can certainly try, doing some rolling around to get used to it. Yeah. Around here, find a good patch of grass or whatever, get some mats or whatever. Yeah. Cause it's fun. And then once you, at least maybe then if you're ready for a class, like we see it, there's gotta be even here some women's only classes to start. With. Yeah. But yeah, it does. I think that would help ease into it, right? Instead of just like, especially if it's a gym too, like I said, it's like you just go in there, it's like, okay, just get on the mat and we're rolling around now. And you're like, what do I do? It's like, oh, just put your leg and do that. It's like, I need some kind of more instruction. So again, that's where it depends on the gym or what have you, but maybe there's things that we can do to
and I would really like the kids to get into it.
The gis are awesome. I love the
gis. I know the gis are really awesome. And like I would really love the kids to get into it, and I would love you to get back into it because I know you really enjoyed it a lot. So
I would. There's lots of things I'd love to get back into. But yeah, I think martial arts is really good. I mean, I'd love to take all of them, but it's like I don't have the time or the money. It just gets expensive, right? It's like, okay, well, it's $100 a month for Jiu Jitsu. Then if I want to do capoeira, it's another $100. And then mix in Muay Thai. Maybe you do Muay Thai, then it's 130, and then it's 250, and that's one person. And then you want to bring kids. You got to get the
fancy stuff to wear because the Muay Thai shorts are awesome.
They are awesome too. Yeah. You want, but we already have that gear too, so at least that's good. But but then you want to bring the kids involved, and then it's like you just can't spend like $500 a month, you know, on that. So anyways, but we'll figure it out. But we'll keep you guys posted on what we do with that. But we highly recommend for you if there's something that you want to take up. I mean, and you've been thinking about it, just do it because I think you'd end up loving it.
Cool. Find
the right gym and find the right rolling partners and have yourself a great time.
Indeed.
Cool. And with that,
Chris by 5.
There we go. Yay. Another podcast. Another day, another podcast. I don't know. Another dollar. I don't know where I'm going with that. So yes, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. If you like this podcast and any of our other stuff, check us out at odumandandrea.com. All of our past stuff are on there for you to listen to and enjoy. And until then, have yourselves a great week and
see you next week.
Have a good one.